right. Thank you, everyone, for being here on tonight. For those of you that are streaming in, we are live on our Begin Again University Facebook page tonight. This is Begin Again University, where it's our leadership, relationship, development, and mentoring coaching platform. We've got a few of our Begin Again University class that's gathered here on tonight. And for those of you who are watching, I thank you for tuning in. If you have not shared this yet, go ahead and do that. And so really tonight, it's all about opportunities to develop management skills, crisis management skills, in terms of beginning again in your life, in about every area of your life. And so I'm glad that each of you are here. I'm glad that our streaming audience will be streaming in either on our group page or on our Begin Again University Facebook page. And so we are on Dominion pages on tonight. And so people may not realize that, but they'll catch it and see it as they are able to see it. Let me do a few housekeeping things tonight about what Begin Again University is really all about and why that's important. And so let me just take a second or two and just mention a few things. Here are a couple of things I want you to make sure that you understand. It's about, people ask, what are the benefits? The benefits are monthly training with myself, and then weekly lunch and learns that will happen and take place throughout each month. Normally the third Wednesday night, right at 12 o'clock noon, we'll spend some time together, and only for about 30 minutes. It'll stream live right inside of our Begin Again University group page, not necessarily the Facebook, not necessarily the university page, but the group page. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in just a second. Some other motivations about why connect with us, and that is this. I call it the 4 M's, and really almost 5. One of the benefits are mentoring, modeling, and the most important one for me is mind molding. You can have the idea of wanting to start over in different areas all your life, all you want to. But unless you've got the capacity to be able to do that, it can become quite difficult, can't it? And so what Begin Again is about is getting your mind in a place where you can have an opportunity to begin again. Let's try this together tonight for our first call and response. You can begin again.
Yes, sir. We can begin again.
All right, that's what I want to hear. We're going to hear a lot of that all throughout the night. Here's a third reason why you can take time to connect with us at Begin Again University. And I like these. These are some takeaways, leadership and organizational development. So it's not just about relationships. It's about people who may want to enter into small business or be able to look at taking a moment of promotion on their jobs, or looking at how do they start over and reconnecting with a family member, or how do I start over and learning how to parent a child. This child's gone from being a teenager to now a young adult, and you may have done some things not in the way you wanted to as a preteen, but you can begin again with them as a young adult between 19 and 25. And so there are opportunities like that that are available for you. And so relationship readiness. Maybe you may be looking at getting married again. I know some of us are not necessarily doing that, looking for a new relationship, but relationship readiness, and I call it relationship readiness and repair. So some may be looking at entering in, but they have got to really look at how do they not do what they've done before that's gotten them in the state that they're in now today. And so I always tell everyone, you can begin again. Come on, let's try it again. You can begin again.
Yes, Coach, we can begin again.
I'm so glad to hear you all tonight. So this has a specialized coaching and mentoring program through what I call my 3Q proprietary model that is designed to do these 3 things: spiritual and relational leadership intelligence with increased capacity in each of these areas. And so it is first spiritual intelligence, relational intelligence, leadership intelligence. And the big area that I want to help you improve in is in the areas of increased capacity to actually be able to begin again in various areas of your life. And so tonight, we're beginning our first master class on tonight here with Begin Again University. And we're going to take time and roll right on through the next, I would say, 8 weeks or so. We'll spend a few minutes meeting at different parts of the year through as we go. And as we plan to do that, it won't necessarily be every second and third Wednesday night. It's actually going to be some Wednesday nights that are going to be already laid out. So if you haven't necessarily seen the flyer, make sure you get a chance to actually take a look at that. And that will give you the dates. We'll be meeting next Wednesday night on the 21st, right back up here in the Begin Again classroom. Is that all right? For those who are streaming in and watching this online or may catch this on replay, if you haven't registered for tonight's class, you can do so at beginagain.tv. Of course, all Dominion there is 50% off. Make sure that you go to that. But listen, I don't want anyone to be turned away in this first semester class because they may not have resources. Because Beginning Again really is about an opportunity of starting right where you are. So if you don't necessarily have that, get in touch with me and I'll be sure to work right along with you. So remember, you can register right at beginagain.tv. Click right on the Crisis Management and Contingency Planning course, and that will help you begin to navigate right along with us. So I'm glad those of you who are tuned in on tonight, I'm glad you're taking a minute to jump right in and tune right on in with us. And so I want to begin tonight with asking and talking to us a little bit about, we'll go around the room and make sure that you project out for our streaming audience that will be watching and listening in on tonight. What would you consider a crisis? Anybody just jump out with any kind of definition you want to give? How would you define what a crisis is? Anybody? So then I'm going to pick on you since Davida came in right after you. I'll pick on you. How would you define what a crisis is?
Basically, a crisis is something that puts you in go mode immediately.
In go mode immediately.
And that's going to have a great impact on you, your life, or people around you.
Yeah, something that puts you in go mode immediately, that automatically, what's that last part you said? That
It's going to have a great impact.
A great impact.
You or the people around you.
Or on you or on the people around you. Davida, how about you? How would you define what a crisis is?
Something that happens spontaneously, that's out of control.
Spontaneously, that's good. Something that happens that's beyond or that's out of your control. Let's move to that next screen. Look at this. When you think of the word crisis, what words tend to come to your mind? When you think of the word crisis, what words tend to come to your mind?
Panic.
Panic. Anybody else?
Emergency.
Emergency. Anybody else?
Stressful.
Stressful. Somebody that's watching on the stream tonight, type those into the chat. Panic, emergency, stressful. Anybody else?
Heightened situation.
Say it one more time.
Heightened situation.
A heightened situation. Heightened situation. If you're watching tonight, type that in. A heightened situation. I got a few words that I put up here on tonight that really come to mind when we think about crisis. I'll make it a little bit larger on the screen for those of you that are streaming in. Here are a couple of words: urgent, upset, helpless, hopeless. How about this word? Anxious. Anxious. Look at this one. Dysfunctional. When a crisis occurs, sometimes without skills to navigate through it, it can cause you to be a little dysfunctional. How about this one? Numb. Anybody ever had something that they experienced that just caused them to go numb in some area of their life? Here is one: hysterical. Because it can be 2 or 3 things that happen to you all at the same time, which can really cause you to go hysterical. Anybody ever been there before with something hysterical that happens? Here's a big one. Sometimes things can just get out of control. So a crisis is something that's urgent, something that makes you upset, something that causes you to feel helpless, hopeless, anxious. You can go numb. Sometimes you can be hysterical, dysfunctional, and really have a moment where you just move right out of control. And how many of you know, like me, I never like to be out of control. So developing crisis management skills helps you to have a measure of control, if you will, but you're not able to be in control all the time. What you want to do, and I'm getting ahead of myself, is learn how to pivot well. So pivot well. So there are several notable biblical characters who lost control and experienced loss as life happened to them by surprise. They experienced life that happened to them by surprise. So I know that this is not necessarily traditional Bible study, and this is Begin Again on tonight, but I'm always going to speak from a faith-based framework if you will. And so you can just put that next screen up on. I want to talk a little bit about some of these biblical characters that that lost control in their lives, but they couldn't control the dynamic. First up is the person Abraham. Abraham lost control, and I put an extra sheet of paper there so that you can take notes. He lost control because of the propositions that he was experiencing and the propositions that came to him. Remember the first one, you've got the King Abimelech comes to him and is asking him the question, is this your wife? And during that time, if your wife was real fine, right? And so all of a sudden he is like, wait a minute, because I'm not trying to die. So he tells Sarai, tell him that's my sister. Now that's a proposition that he can't control. He's outnumbered. He don't know what's going to happen or take place if he answers yes. And the pattern and culture in that time is if somebody else wanted your woman and they outnumbered you, they could come and take her from you. And so that's a crisis. That'll make you real anxious. Go. Look at this. He has another proposition that comes to him. Check this one out. The proposition of when Sarai wants to help Abraham out because he's old, she's old, but she is believing God and he's believing God, and she tries to help God out by offering to Abraham her servant girl Hagar. Now that's something else that's beyond his control, because it wasn't, if I can say it this way, Abraham wasn't trying to have a side piece. Okay, that was beyond his control. And so he had to figure out, how do I pivot through that in order to find myself in a different kind of scenario? Look at this one. How about Joseph? Joseph is a moment where a crisis happens to him, where his brothers decide to sell him and he becomes property. So what takes place in his life is a moment of injustice. Sometimes when injustice happens to you, injustice can immediately put you right into crisis. I can imagine Joseph being numb, because it's one thing for people that don't know you to misuse you, but what happens, what do you do when people that you trust, all of a sudden they sell you out? That can put you in a moment of crisis. And so you've got to be able to pivot your way through that in order to be able to handle that and navigate through that very, very well. Look at this one right here. Look at David. Let me go back to Joseph for a second. He becomes property, and while he's property in Potiphar's house, all of a sudden he experienced something like Abraham does. A proposition comes to him that takes and puts him out of control. He's in a crisis moment. He doesn't necessarily, end up sleeping with Potiphar's wife, but goes to jail anyway. I mean, if I'm going to go to jail, I might as well go ahead on and give him something to charge me with. And say, yeah, I did it. I mean, if you're going to begin again, let me have something to begin again about. Am I right about it? Yeah, come on. Look at this one right here. I don't know about y'all. That's just the way I am right there. This is Dr. Ray Johnson tonight. Bishop not here, okay? Bishop not here. He's not here. So look at this one. Look at David. David gets into it. Don't have to be like that, Steve. David gets into a crisis moment through observation. I'm right there in 2 Kings. I'm right there in chapter 13. Okay, and in 2 Kings chapter 13, David's crisis moment is like this, because the text of scripture there says, at the time when the kings are supposed to go out to war, David's in the wrong place at the wrong time, and a crisis really of belief happens to him, because if he is not there on his rooftop in the palace where he can see Bathsheba on her rooftop taking a bath, maybe he doesn't get triggered. Okay? Because he's in the wrong place in the wrong time, he's in a crisis. What do I do? And because he's not able to manage himself, one crisis leads to another crisis that leads to another crisis that leads to another crisis. How many of you would say David is a man after God's own heart? How many of y'all would agree with me on that? David was chosen by God. How many of y'all agree with me on that? However, David was not, he was not the best father. Come on. And David was a horrible husband. Come on, talk to me. So David had to have moments throughout his life where he had to pivot so that he could begin again. And here is the unique thing about him. The scripture records that according to God's design for David's life, His leadership in terms of the kingdom would never end. I think that David mastered beginning again in his life. Come on, one more time. You can begin again.
Yes, Coach. We can begin again.
I'm so glad to hear you all tonight. Check out Daniel. Daniel's crisis moments happen by way of conflict. You realize that there are in some cultures, some conflict you can't avoid. Because of Daniel's stance and his adherence to the Mishnah and the Torah, you shall have no other gods before me. They are taken captive. He's in a different culture and a different environment, and everybody has got to worship the image of Nebuchadnezzar. And all of a sudden, if you don't bow down, crisis moment happens, you end up in the furnace. Daniel has a decision to make. He's got to decide, how am I going to pivot through this? And without crisis management skills and without understanding who's in charge in your life, beginning again can be difficult for you, can it? And so Daniel ends up in some precarious situations. What I love about his story is that in each moment he had to pivot, God met him. Consider him and his three brothers, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Remember, they don't eat of the king's meat. They say, test us for 10 days. We will eat the Lord's food, fruits and vegetables. We will not participate at the king's table. God meets them. He ends up being now second to the governor in command in Persia because he pivoted well. And I want to talk to you about how to do that. Last two, Saul and Paul. He goes through a transformation process. He thinks he's doing the right thing in his persecution of Christians. And all of a sudden, while he's persecuting them, what ends up happening? Bright light shines, right? Falls off his horse. Crisis moment occurs. Anybody tracking with me? All of a sudden, he goes blind, sees nobody. He's got to depend on people to get him into the city. And now he's got to depend on people that he's not going to die. And literally, he's got to depend on somebody else to teach him what he thinks he knows that he doesn't. That's a crisis moment if I've ever seen one. And he learns how to pivot well because we got a third of the New Testament. Last one, Timothy's crisis. Timothy's crisis is discipline. He's almost 20 years old. Paul decides this is going to be my successor based upon what the Holy Spirit said to me. And now all of a sudden, with him as his successor, do y'all realize what happens? Timothy is a Gentile. Paul is a Jew. So all of a sudden, Paul is like, okay, the covenant is based on circumcision. And so Paul has got to circumcise him at 18, 19, 20 years old. I know me, Mike, and Eric can all say, ouch. That's a crisis moment. Here's a thought. What do you do when you're in a crisis moment and pivoting out of that causes pain through discipline? Write that down. Write that down. There are some moments where pivoting out of a crisis only comes by the way of pain. Pivoting out of a crisis only comes by the way of pain. And so I want us to really have an understanding of that tonight, that crisis moments happen to everybody, everywhere. And so take a look at this one. Let me make it large on the screen for those of you who are watching and who are going to catch this on the replay. Let's go to that next screen. A crisis can be defined as any deviation from an intended course of a planned action. A crisis can be defined as any deviation from an intended course of a planned action. Every last one of us have got moments where we plan to do something. And then you may plan to go down 64 from Hampton University to get off on Jefferson Avenue to go to that Walmart because they got something that the Walmart in Hampton doesn't have. But all of a sudden you run into an accident at Oyster Point, and all of a sudden now you got to figure out, how am I going to get to that Walmart? Well, there's a couple of moments you got to pivot in order to take. So anytime there's a deviation from anything that you have been engaged in of a course of action, that can be considered a crisis. Look at this next one right here. I put this one in because I wanted to not only define crisis for you, but I wanted to look at management. Would you take a look at this right here? Management is a process. Everybody say process.
Process.
Management is a process of planning, decision-making, organizing. Look at this: leading, motivation. Here's the big one: and controlling the human resource, financial, physical, and information resources of an organization, add this, and or entity or people to reach its goals efficiently and effectively. The word I want you to focus in on, there are a couple of them. I want you to focus in and underline the word process, and I want you to focus in and underline the word control. Really, the ability to manage well in terms of a crisis has everything to do with being able to control the process. And controlling the process first begins within. Jot that down. Controlling the process begins within. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I want to just mention this early. How you respond to a thing makes all the difference in the world. How you respond to a thing makes all the difference in the world. Let me go to this next one. Here are two key words. I put them up on the screen for you. Process. Process is how something is done. Control is why something is done. Process is how something is done. Control is why something is done. And if you're going to be able to navigate through crisis moments, you've got to get a handle on, where am I in the process? Where am I in the process? And then you've got to be able to quickly answer these questions. What can I control? What can't I control? Because you realize that there are some things that are beyond your control. Here's what you can't control. You cannot control other people. You cannot control what other people do. You can't control how other people think. You cannot control other people's worldview. And you cannot control other people's behavior. What you can control is how their worldview, how they think, what their behavior is, and what they do, and how that impacts you. And you can determine what happens and what does not happen, listen to this, by how the process is going. I know I've said this a few times in a few other different kind of environments. Believe people when they, watch this, show you who they are. Believe people, believe programs, believe processes when they show you who they are. Not when they tell you, when they show you. Everything is all about action. And I think just for a moment, if I could jump into this, let me see if I can do that in a good way. Oh, good. A lot of times, for those of us in our faith persuasion that happen to have an alignment and believe in the Lord Jesus Christ as Christians, we tend to take people and scenarios at face value. Remember, the scripture says, love people. Don't necessarily, I would be hard pressed. You maybe got one or two scriptures that reference trust. But we're not necessarily supposed to trust people per se. We ought to love people, but we trust God. And a lot of times, crises can happen in our lives because we end up misplacing that. We end up putting our trust in people, okay, and loving God, or we may end up switching it in the wrong place at the wrong time. When really the person that we're supposed to love people and God, but we really are supposed to trust God. People got to show it. How do y'all understand that? If you can get that down, you can navigate your way through crisis moments, pivot moments in your life. Come on, let's go to this next one. I'm going to make this one a little bit larger on the screen for those of you who are watching me on the stream on tonight. And look at this right here, crisis management skills. So here's another definition that I want to put in place. Crisis management is about developing the skills. Underline that word skills in your notes. Underline that word skills in your notes. It's about developing the skills to control, here it is, our response to how a process of a deviation occurs from a standard course of action. It's about how to control our response from a deviation from how, control our response to how a process of a deviation occurs from a standard course of action. I wanted you to fill that one in, so I left it empty and blank for you on your page, or you can put it in on your notes. But now, look at this. Here's what I mean when I say this right here. I'm going to make this a little bit larger on the screen here. Look at our formula. Remember our formula, leadership equals response, okay, times time plus process. Remember we talked about leadership? Leaders are developed by process, by response multiplied by times plus process. Look at this next one right here. It should be consistent within your notes as well. So crisis management, here's another working definition. Jot this one down. Crisis management skills are needed, this is good, when one discerns the difference between the idea of expectations and reality. When you discern the difference between the idea of expectations and reality, you have just started to develop your skills for how to navigate through a crisis. Because all too often, we don't necessarily believe people when they show us, or believe situations when they show us. I can remember being in a moment, sitting down, having a conversation with another leader, and I'm going to use this one early inside of our talk time tonight as an example, and that is, I had a moment where I had a false expectation in what I expected from this particular individual. And because my expectations were misplaced, I ended up disappointed. So I had to end up pivoting based upon what it is that they showed me, watch this, about who it is that they were. I'll say that one more time. I had to end up pivoting about what it is that they showed me about who it is that they really were. And this was a person I had admiration for, I had appreciation for, I had respect for, but once I could not necessarily go by, watch this, jot these down, status. I couldn't go by title. I couldn't go by position. I had to go by their actions. I'll do them again. I couldn't go by their title. I couldn't go by their action. I couldn't go by their position. I had to make a decision based upon their action. And whenever you have moments where you've got to make decisions by your actions, by a person's or an entity's actions, therein lies the moment of pain. So being able to navigate through that process quickly is very important. And let me mention this. What oftentimes can happen in moments like that is the pain of a revelation of who an individual or situation is can cause you to have a reaction. I want to urge you to part of crisis management is managing your reactions. You might be in shock, but you can't let your face tell it. Come on, talk to me. You can begin again.
Yes, coach. We can begin again.
You cannot allow your face to tell how you really feel, or what really is impacting you. What you have to do is make a mental note and be able to pivot out of that situation so that you're able to preserve, keyword, your own sanity. To the degree that you can preserve your own sanity, and to the degree that you can get quickly to your destiny. I'll say that one more time. To the degree that you can preserve your own sanity is to the degree that you can get quickly to your own destiny. Somebody type that in on the replay. Isn't this good stuff right here? This is good stuff, isn't it? Yeah. Let me try that one more time. This is good stuff, isn't it? This is good stuff. Maybe it's a little bit too real. Listen, this is not Sunday morning or regular Wednesday night Bible study. We got to get down and talk talk into the real issues where life happens for us. And our ability to navigate through crisis management moments makes all the difference in the world. Go ahead on to that next slide for me. Go ahead on to that next slide for me. That next slide for me. Let's see. I may have gotten into a point where I got some of the wrong thing. Yeah, so variables, go ahead and slide that one more time. Let me see what we are. Yeah, keep rolling through that. Roll right on through that. Roll right on through that. Right on through that. Keep right on going. Keep right on going. Keep right on going. So for those of you that may be tuning in, I'm going to make a quick shift real quickly. I'm going to add another and a different slideshow to catch right up. Yep, the ability, yeah, go right on and let's see. Hold right there. That's exactly where I'm going to be. Slide right in there. So let me add a different kind of study for us. And to 9. That's not what I want. Let's remove you. Just hold it fast with me real quickly. I need to get this together for those that are watching and make sure that they're able to track along with this. Yeah, let's go back here. And try it again. Let's see. Yeah. So here's what we'll do. For those of you that are watching that will catch this on the replay, I'm going to make sure that you have an opportunity to be able to find these particular slides. And it seems like I've got a different one, and I want to have another one that is available for you. Give me 1 second, and I'll see if I can upload something different that you'll be able to have tonight, that you'll be able to see. Let's go with this one instead. So, having mentioned some of that, let me share this as an example of how to pivot real quickly, of just how to be able to pivot your way through. So I was in the midst of a difficult moment. That's the best way for me to say it that way, if I could say it like that. And I actually went to this teaching and training, and it actually was a service from a great friend of mine. And he talked about belief and managing our unbelief. And so he talked about how there were moments where he felt like, I am the pastor of this great movement, but the pandemic did something psychologically to all of us as ministers. And he talked about, in a moment of transparency, how he felt like resigning from the church. And in the process of about being ready to resign from the church, he literally heard the Lord say to him, do you believe me? So he gave us these towels that I want to show you. And so he said to us, I don't want you guys to ever throw in the towel. I'll hold this up on the screen so that you can able to see this. And it simply says, Lord, I believe. And he said, but the reality is, there are going to be moments. There are going to be moments. Let me switch over to this particular one so that people who are watching can actually see this one a little bit closer. Yeah, there'll be moments, it says, Lord, I believe. But then there are going to be moments that each and every one of us are going to have where we literally have to say, Lord, help my unbelief. And note that this is all on the exact same time. So there are going to be moments in your life where you're going to say, Lord, I believe, but something's got to give way here. Help my unbelief. And then there are moments in our lives where we say, Lord, I really do believe, but I don't know how in the world I'm going to make it through this kind of moment. Would you please help my unbelief? And so each and every one of us are going to have moments like that in our lives. Can you all just mention maybe one that has happened for you? I'll go around the room real quick. I want you to think in your mind's eye really, really quick about a moment you had where you said, I really do believe God, but I need God to help me navigate and manage through this one right here. Anybody want to share? Go ahead.
I'll share the passing of my mother. Raised how we were raised, and being believers. So, backstory: my grandmother passed, I think, like a year and some change before she did. My grandmother definitely was the faith leader of the family.
Yeah.
And so, we honored, she's going to heaven, she's going to see the Father, and that helped. But then when my mom passed, like right after, something inside of me I believe that, but selfishly, I didn't want to lose her. So, and then I was like, that's crazy. It's crazy that I would say I want her to be here and not be in the presence of her father. So I can't believe what I believe and then be like, I want her to be here when she's gone to a better place. So I really had to pray about that, and I really had to ask God to help me to not feel adversely because she was no longer here.
Anybody else?
I have one.
Go ahead.
So this was in 2014. Matter of fact, I was in this ministry. So no, I was ill, and so I had a significant weight loss. So I had to go to these different doctors. And this one doctor, she just looked at me like, I won't be here long. She didn't say it, but the way she looked, and how you go to the doctor and they'll tell you, they're gonna do these tests. She laid on the line. She felt, has some type of terminal illness or whatever. And during the time, Sammy was just in the height of high school. I mean, when I tell you busy, it was a lot.
Yeah.
And then we were still co-parenting out of state. So every other weekend or something, I had to meet his dad on 95. And I wasn't led to tell anybody in my family about it because I wanted to, just believe God and pray because really nothing they could do really. And then you have to be careful, with people if you tell them something the doctor said that might be terminal because they'll be able to put you in bed before. So I just had to I remember I could get enough energy to get up to come to church to listen to you the service and stuff. And so I was like, I know I'm healed, I know I'm gonna live, I know I'm gonna beat this. But like she said, I just had to save my unbelief. So my turning point was right here in this ministry. I hadn't joined yet because I was waiting to relocate Samuel here to make sure he liked it first. But I said, give me time to keep watching you and everything. Because I had to go into different churches. But here, I just kept coming back because you kept feeding that word. But you did an altar call. It was on a Sunday. You did an altar call. And you probably don't remember, but I remember because you gave me hope. So when you did the altar call, there was a elderly man, and he was having some issues with his ear. I don't know whether it was, they told me he had vertigo or what, but there was some hearing issues that this man was having. And so, you went around and prayed and everything, but this man, y'all's family was used and other leaders, had laid hands on him and everything. And y'all did some extra praying with him because of his predicament. It appeared that his predicament was worse, whatever. And so before the service was over, and after he prayed for the man and everything, a lot of his hearing, he was able to hear. So that really was my turning point. And that Sunday, I really had to push myself to come to church. Sammy went with me, so I knew I had to come to church and go back to bed. But I made it through, and I'm still here.
Look at
and the
that.
same doctor gonna do a procedure again on me at the end of the month, so she gonna see I'm still here. I'm older, but I'm still here.
Look at
But
that.
I had to believe God,
Come on, let's just thank God for both of those. That is good. You can begin again.
Yes,
We can begin again.
So look at this particular formula on the screen about crisis management skill development. Because this is really about developing skills on how to pivot. So when you look at this, I'll make it larger for those of you who are watching the streaming. Crisis management is developed with response, multiplied times time plus process. Look at what that's in parentheses, time plus process. To the degree that you can shorten your response of time plus process enables you to get through whatever the moment is so that you can get to a destined place in your life. Look at this next one here. Go to that next one. Crisis management skills are needed when one discerns the difference between the idea of expectations and reality. When you discern the difference between expectations and reality. So here I want to put the working definitions up. I may have moved a little bit too fast, but I'm going to put them up on the screen. Look at these. Crisis management is the ability to discern, discipline oneself, to decide. Now look at this. How to pivot. Once you discern and then discipline yourself of how to pivot to maintain the intended course of direction, regardless of the sort of incident, whatever it may be. So in other words, you're headed in a direction. You believe that this direction is a God-intended course of direction for your life. Life's gonna happen to you. You gotta understand and know that going in. But how you respond to life happening to you and processing through that is what the key is. So I can tell you from my own experience being here over the last 20-something years or so, I've seen all kinds of stuff. But focus and determining, and I shared this a couple of times, you know, it would be my father who would come into the office and say, "Who called you?" And I would say, "Look, God called." He said, "Well, why are you sitting here pouting? Get on out of here, be who you're supposed to be, do what you got to do." He did that for a period of 6 months. I didn't just get over stuff overnight, but to the degree that I was able to shorten the time span of an impact of life happening, enabled me to take next steps in order to be able to move. That makes sense?
Yes.
Look at this right here. I want to go to this next one. I'll make this a little bit larger on the screen. So how you pivot. Pivot is this: our ability to manage, process, and problem solve through pain. That's what pivot is. Our ability to manage, process, and problem solve through pain. So just because there's pain doesn't mean you stop the process of navigating through the pain. Now, of course, there are going to be times when you got to take a break. You need to go talk to a therapist, get a counselor, and spend some time doing that. But you know what's different between our generation and the generation 2 generations behind us? I often discuss this with my wife all the time. Sometimes we do them a disservice for not teaching them how to navigate through pain. And just because someone hurts your feelings doesn't mean you stop being who you are to do what you've got to do. Just because you made a bad grade somewhere doesn't mean you stop being who you are to do what you have to do. You've got to be able to manage the process and problem solve through pain. And this is, I'm not talking about masking pain. I'm talking about acknowledging this hurts. Then what? All too often, we have a tendency to get stuck in an emotional moment, get stuck in our feelings, get stuck in how we perceive something, get stuck in recognizing I misassessed or I had a false expectation about something. Don't get stuck there. What are the next steps out of that? And that's what we're going to talk about in this class, how to do that. Here's a thought-provoking statement. Look at this one on the screen there. Here's a thought-provoking statement. A crisis is a turning point in the course of anything. In the course of anything. In the course of anything. And it's often painful. A crisis is a turning point. So all too often we can focus on a crisis in terms of the pain and the impact, and oh my God, I can't believe this happened to me. I can tell you I probably went about 8 to 10 months through a crisis that I experienced of going, I can't believe, I was in such shock. Remember one of our buzzwords, shock? I couldn't believe that this was happening to me. On the one end, I couldn't believe it was happening. On the other end, God was like, don't fight against this. I'm with you in this. This is me. Stop fighting. And then I go from shock to, what do you mean don't fight? And so to the degree that I was able to process through that was to the degree that I was able to enabling my way to get through it. So I want you to understand pain is a part of the process. Look at this one. I like this one. I'll make it larger on the screen. All of us need a reality check. We must do away with the notion that we won't have pain, particularly for those of us as believers. What does the scripture say? After you have suffered a while, humble yourself under the mighty hand of God. He will lift you up. After you have suffered a while, then the Lord will lift you. So suffering is a part of what it means to be a believer. I think that prosperity gospel has done us a disservice. I think that word of faith movement, unbalanced, has done us a disservice. Everybody's not going to be a millionaire. Okay, the Lord's given us the power to get wealth, but that don't mean you're going to be a millionaire or a billionaire. That power to get wealth is about stewardship. And so the degree that you're able to manage well in terms of being a good steward will determine how well you're able to navigate your way through successfully. So even coming to that reality can be somewhat painful sometimes. Look at this one. Here's pivot. Here's another one I want you to understand. Make life happen instead of life happening to you. I think that's so important. You get to decide how you want this life to happen for you. You get to decide that. Not people, not scenarios, not situations. Let me just go run them down. Not systemic, structural, societal issues for those of us of Dr. Hugh. Not someone's opinion about who they perceive you to be, which is why I love the fact that Mike is a part of our ministry here, because the furthest thing away from him is the idea of bigotry, prejudice, and race. That's not even a part of his fabric or DNA in terms of his makeup as an individual and a person. So just because someone may have a perception of him like that, because his skin tone is different from us, he chooses not to allow that to impact how he perceives and operates with others. I love it every single time. I love to use that example. So you get the chance to make life happen to you. So as we wind down tonight, for those of you who are at home, you won't be able to, we'll have what I'm sharing tonight up on the website for those of you who are registered. And I'll tell you what, make sure that you choose what level of the Begin Again University leadership development group you want to be a part of, 1, 2, or 3. I'll upload the notes from tonight, and I'll upload the handouts tonight for those who are part of the mentoring group. And that way you'll be able to have access to these questions. But I'm going to put them up on the screen. So I'm going to take a few minutes and examine where we are and where we have been in our lives. We'll take a moment and examine where we are and where we've been in our lives. Look at the screen here. I want you to think about your journey. And so I'm getting ready to come into some of your homework. I want to think about your journey. And I want you to write down key moments, circumstances that have shaped your life up to this point. This is part of your homework for next week. I want you to just jot down the key moments in your life, good or bad, that have happened in your life that have helped to shape where you are today. And it can be as many as 10 or as less as 2. But I want you to write those down and jot those down. Because what we're going to do is as we go through these 8 weeks, I'm going to help you develop a crisis management timeline of how you navigated through those moments. So you can develop a skill set of what to do and what not to do the next time something remotely closely looks like that's happening again. Because remember, our adversary has no new tricks. There's nothing new under the sun. He's going to come back around with the same kind of stuff, and how you respond to that determines how you navigate through it. And I want to help you pivot and be able to come through this. So I'm going to make these a little bit larger on the screen for those of you who are watching tonight. We're winding down with a few more minutes left. Here's some questions I want you to review as you do the homework over the weekend or over the week until next week.
These
And
on
then-
the handout?
It's on the handout.
Oh,
You should
okay.
have some questions. It should say questions to review. They're in your handout.
Okay.
For those who are watching, they're not necessarily in the handout. So we move relatively quickly with reviews.
Oh, okay.
So, question review, how do I handle people, places, and things when I first meet or encounter them? How do I handle people when I first encounter them? Do I ask questions for clarity? I take them at face value? Or I assume the worst until they or it proves otherwise? You can only have one answer. Because I know some of you are thinking, well, I do a little bit of all of that. Which one is your most predominant? Come on, let's go to the next one. How do you develop expectations of people, places, and things? How do you develop expectations of people, places, and things? Do you do that by experience on a case-by-case basis? Or do you examine hearsay information and consider an image of people? Or do you expect the worst until they, them, or it shows me otherwise? I want you to take time to think through those. Here's another one. How do you process disruptions and disappointments of an expectation? I am closed to any other possibilities from them, they, or it. I consider all the circumstances before I make a decision to re-engage. I respond to them, they, or it with barriers, boundaries, and within my limitations. The last one, I respond to them, they, or it with barriers, boundaries, within this difference, their limitations. One is your limitations. Another one is their limitations. Because what we're going to find out is we're going to find out how well your processing center works. So when something takes place and you get triggered in an area, oh, I've seen this before, how do I pivot out of this? Okay, here's another one. What informs you of how the world around you functions? Experience with people, places, persons, and things. Exposure to new information and technology concerning people, places, persons, and things. Here's one. Exact information about people, places, persons, and things. So I want you to take time, and I don't want you to shotgun your answers. I want you to take the week, write your responses down, and then I want you to tell me why your responses are the way that they are. Look at this last one, an indication as to where you are in the process of developing discipline in the area of discernment. Here's what you're going to find out. Because the key to crisis management is your ability to discern who or what a situation, scenario, person, place, or thing is going to help you with your ability to discern. So listen, we're going to gather again next week. Right at 7:30, we'll be gathering again right here in terms of the streams that you're seeing us on for those of you who have registered. So we're inside of the group page and on the Begin Again University Facebook page and of course the YouTube page. So we won't be all over everywhere because I want to tailor this down to each and every one of us. So I always say it this way, always remember, you can begin again.
Yes,
Coach.
we can begin again.
Thank you all for tuning in tonight, for joining in with us. We'll see you as we gather again next week. Share this with someone. Make sure that they get registered at beginagain.tv for connecting in with us for this crisis management masterclass. We'll see you all next week. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.